You know that feeling when you buy something you actually need, and you still feel bad about it? Like, you've been thinking about getting new shoes for weeks. The ones you have are falling apart. You finally go to the store, you find a decent pair on sale, you buy them, and then, on the way home, there's this weird tightness in your chest. This quiet voice saying, "Did I really need those? Should I have waited longer? What if I need that money for something else?" And here's the strangest part. You can afford it. You're not in debt. You didn't blow your budget. You bought something completely reasonable. But the guilt is still there. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. There's a psychological reason this happens, and once you understand it, money starts to feel different. Most people think guilt around spending means one of two things. Either you're irresponsible with money, or you grew up without enough of it. And while those can play a role, they're not the whole story. Because here's what nobody talks about. Guilt isn't always logical. It doesn't show up because you made a bad choice. It shows up because somewhere along the way, your brain learned to associate spending money with loss, danger, or shame. And that association runs so deep that even when spending makes sense, the emotional alarm still goes off. Think about it like this. If you grew up in a house where money was tight, every purchase was a trade-off. Buying new clothes meant not buying groceries. Going out to eat meant stress at the end of the month. You didn't just learn that money was limited. You learned that spending it came with consequences. And those consequences usually showed up as tension, arguments, or anxiety. So your brain started treating money like a resource you had to protect at all costs. And that instinct doesn't just go away when your income goes up. Even when you're financially stable, that old programming is still running in the background, whispering that you shouldn't have spent that money, that you should have saved it, that something bad is coming, and you just made yourself more vulnerable. But here's the other side of it. Even if you didn't grow up with money stress, you can still develop spending guilt. Because we live in a culture that sends completely contradictory messages about money. On one hand, you're told to save, invest, be responsible. Think about the future. Build your emergency fund. Max out your retirement account. Don't waste money on things that don't matter. On the other hand, you're constantly surrounded by messages telling you to spend. Buy this, upgrade that, treat yourself, you deserve it. Every ad, every influencer, every friend posting their vacation photos is reinforcing the idea that spending money is how you enjoy life. So you're stuck in the middle, trying to figure out which voice to listen to. And no matter what you do, it feels wrong. You save money, and you feel like you're missing out. You spend money, and you feel guilty. There's no winning. Let me tell you what I think is really happening here. Guilt around spending isn't actually about the money. It's about control. Or more specifically, the fear of losing control. When you spend money, you're making a choice. You're deciding that this thing, right now, is worth more than the potential future use of that money. And that decision forces you to confront uncertainty. What if you need that money later? What if something unexpected happens? What if you made the wrong call? Your brain hates uncertainty. It wants guarantees. It wants to know that you'll be okay no matter what. And spending money is the opposite of a guarantee. It's a bet that this purchase is worth it, a bet that you'll still be fine tomorrow. And if you're someone who's experienced financial instability, or even just watched someone else go through it, that bet feels dangerous. Because you've seen what happens when people run out of money. You've seen the stress, the panic, the loss of options, and your brain is doing everything it can to make sure that doesn't happen to you. So every time you spend, even on something small, your subconscious is running a calculation. It's asking, are we still safe? Do we still have enough? Did we just put ourselves at risk? And most of the time, the answer your brain gives is, I don't know, but it feels like we just made a mistake. That's the guilt. It's not a reflection of your actual financial situation. It's your brain trying to protect you from a threat that might not even exist. Here's where it gets tricky, though. Because once you start feeling guilty about spending, it changes your relationship with money in ways you don't expect. Some people respond to spending guilt by becoming hyper-restrictive. They start avoiding purchases altogether, even necessary ones. New clothes? No, I can make these last another year. Dinner with friends? No, I'll just stay home. A vacation? Absolutely not. That's a waste. And on the surface, that might look like discipline. But what it actually is fear. You're not saving because you have a plan. You're saving because spending feels dangerous, and the only way to quiet the anxiety is to not spend at all. The problem is, that doesn't work long term, because eventually, the deprivation catches up with you. You start to resent the restrictions. You feel like you're punishing yourself for no reason. And then, one day, something snaps, and you go the opposite direction. You spend impulsively, emotionally, as a way to release all that built-up pressure. And then the guilt comes back. But now it's worse. Because you didn't just spend money. You lost control. You proved to yourself that you can't be trusted. And the cycle starts all over again. Other people respond to spending guilt differently. They spend anyway, but they spend in ways that don't feel real. Subscriptions that auto-renew, online shopping late at night, small purchases that don't register emotionally because they're under a certain amount. It's like their brain found a loophole. If the spending doesn't feel intentional, then it doesn't trigger the guilt. But the money still disappears. And eventually, they look at their account and wonder where it all went. Both of these patterns, restriction and avoidance, come from the same place. They're coping mechanisms, ways of managing the emotional discomfort that comes with making financial decisions. But neither one actually solves the problem. Because the problem isn't the spending. It's the belief system underneath it. So what's the shift? I think it starts with separating two things that we tend to confuse: financial responsibility and emotional self-punishment. Being financially responsible means making informed decisions. It means knowing what you can afford, planning for the future, and being intentional with your money. That's healthy. That's smart. But punishing yourself emotionally every time you spend money? That's not responsibility. That's internalized anxiety masquerading as discipline. And the truth is, you can be financially responsible and still enjoy spending money. Those two things are not opposites. Here's how I started thinking about it differently. Every time I felt guilty about a purchase, I started asking myself one question. If I don't spend this money, what am I saving it for? Not in a vague, future-focused way. Specifically, what goal, what emergency, what plan am I protecting by not buying this thing? And most of the time, I didn't have an answer. I wasn't saving for anything in particular. I was just not spending, because not spending felt safer. But safety isn't the same as progress. And holding on to money out of fear isn't the same as building wealth. Real financial security doesn't come from never spending. It comes from knowing what you need, planning for it, and then giving yourself permission to use money the way it's meant to be used. Money isn't supposed to sit in your account forever. It's a tool. It's supposed to be exchanged for things that improve your life. Shelter, food, experiences, comfort, time, peace of mind. That's what it's for. And yes, you should save. You should invest. You should plan for the future. But you should also let yourself live in the present without treating every purchase like a moral failure. I'll give you a real example. A few years ago, I needed a new laptop. My old one was slow, crashing constantly, making my work take twice as long as it should. I had the money. I'd been saving specifically for this. But I kept putting it off. Why? Because every time I thought about spending that much money in one go, I felt sick. What if something happened? What if I needed that money for an emergency? What if I regretted it? So I kept using the broken laptop. And I kept feeling frustrated. And I kept telling myself I was being responsible. But I wasn't being responsible. I was being afraid. Finally, I bought the laptop. And you know what happened? Nothing. No emergency showed up. No financial disaster. I didn't regret it. My work got easier. My stress went down. And I realized I'd been making myself miserable for no reason. The guilt I felt wasn't protecting me. It was just there. A leftover emotional reaction that had nothing to do with my actual situation. So if you feel guilty every time you spend money, here's what I want you to consider. First, recognize that the guilt is not a fact. It's a feeling, and feelings can lie. Just because you feel bad about spending money doesn't mean you made a bad decision. Second, start separating necessary guilt from unnecessary guilt. If you're spending money you don't have on things you don't need in ways that hurt your future, yeah, that guilt is useful. It's telling you something's off. But if you're spending money you've planned for on things that genuinely improve your life and you still feel bad, that's not useful guilt. That's just noise. And you don't have to listen to it. Third, give yourself permission to spend without justification. Not recklessly, but intentionally. You don't have to earn the right to buy yourself something. You don't have to hit a certain savings milestone before you're allowed to enjoy your money. You're allowed to spend money on things that make you happy, comfortable, or less stressed. That's not irresponsible. That's human. Look, I'm not saying you should ignore your finances or stop caring about the future. Financial stability matters. Planning matters. But so does living your life in a way that doesn't feel like constant self-denial. You can save for the future and still buy the shoes. You can invest in your retirement and still go to dinner with your friends. You can be financially responsible and still let yourself breathe. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The goal isn't to accumulate as much money as possible. The goal is to build a life where money supports you instead of controlling you. And that starts with letting go of the idea that spending money is inherently bad. It's not. It's neutral. What matters is why you're spending, and whether it aligns with what you actually value. So the next time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest after making a purchase, pause. Ask yourself if the guilt is based on reality or just old programming. And if it's the latter, let it go. You're doing better than you think.